Hi everyone, welcome back to my series on 1973 movies. On this episode I'm going to be talking about a movie called Themroc, which is the last of the 5 movies that my good friend Matthew sent me on the occasion that he discovered I was doing this series. He wanted me to see a bunch of really obscure 1973 movies that not too many people have heard of. And Themroc, I believe, is the most obscure. I believe that this is a French movie, but it's hard to be sure exactly because although some of the dialogue sounds French, a lot of it also sounds like gibberish. This is actually a movie that doesn't have any subtitles on it, but most of the scenes are completely dialogue-free, which is unusual. The main character is played by Michel Piccoli, and he's basically a guy who works as a painter. The opening sequence shows him getting up and having some coffee, and then being reminded by his wife of many years that it's 6 a.m. and it's time to get a move on because it's time to go to work. So he trudges off to his job, and there's this long sequence in which he is traveling there, first by bus and then by train, or walking through underground passages, and you have these quick flashbacks where you see this is a routine that he's played out numerous times. There's numerous flashbacks on the occasions as his wife is pointing at the clock saying it's time to leave, and the number of occasions in which he's gotten up to make coffee, and the number of occasions as he's trudged out of the door with his friend on the way to the bus. So he's been doing this a long, long time, and the dam, as they say, is about to burst. When he's working, climbs up on a scaffolding to an office building to paint on a window, and he gets distracted because there's an executive talking to his secretary, and his secretary is actually sitting on his desk and showing off her legs and just being very beautiful, and the executive notices what the painter is doing, and so he basically opens the window and hits him in the nose, hits him in the face, so he starts bleeding, and then he complains about him to his superiors, and he gets the painter gets disciplined, basically, and there's this whole long sequence where he's just sitting around waiting for someone to yell at him and bitch him out. And as he's leaving for work that day, in the middle of the day, I don't know whether he's been fired or he's quitting, because obviously I can't tell what anyone's saying, but he suddenly feels free. He feels elated, and he's just walking around and kind of dancing through the streets and just happy. And once he gets home, then things really start to get strange. There's actually a young woman living in the apartment with him and his wife, and I guess she's just basically a boarder. She's paying rent there or something like that. Pretty sure it's not his daughter, because she's walking around in a robe that's like open pretty much all the time. But once he gets home, he starts to kiss her right in front of his wife, and you know, is basically taunting his wife basically about the fact that he doesn't want her anymore. He wants the young girl instead. And then he takes her up to the roof and he grabs some construction materials and some bricks, and he begins to board himself into a room in his apartment. I think it's the dining room. I can't really be sure. But he puts the bricks in, and he puts the mortar in between the bricks, and he builds up this wall, and he boards himself in this room. And then he takes a mallet and he starts to break open the window that overlooks the courtyard in his apartment complex, and then he smashes the walls. He makes this big hole, this huge, enormous hole in the wall of his apartment. He just sits there and lives in this area of his home for several days, just sitting in this area. And then he takes all the furniture and he throws it out, and he smashes up all the bookcases and things like that, the table, the chairs, throws lamps, all the stuff out in the courtyard, and it makes this big mess. And the people watch across from him, another married couple with several kids, they start doing the same thing. The wife sort of gets inspired by him, and so she breaks her window, and she starts smashing her walls and creating this big hole. And soon enough, her husband, who's sort of an uptight fellow, he starts joining in, but he's very timid about it. But eventually you've got 2 people across from each other who have smashed through their walls and are basically just sort of, and the cops come along, and then you've got, you know, guys in riot gear coming along and figuring out what they want to do and how they're going to handle the situation. They can't get to the guy, the painter, through his apartment because he's walled the place up. He just can't. They just can't do it. But there's this whole sort of long sequence of several days and nights in which they're just sort of hanging out and just not really communicating with each other, but just sort of laughing and having a good time and feeling much more free than they have in a long time. Meanwhile, the painter's wife is still in another part of the apartment that hasn't been walled up, and she's just kind of suffering. I don't really know what's going on with her. She's just miserable, you know, because she isn't having fun like the rest of them. I actually was wondering at one point whether or not the whole movie was actually a dream of hers, or maybe it's a dream of the painters, and one of them would wake up and discover that the apartment was just fine, and he would get up and go to work again. That didn't actually happen. Meanwhile, the young girl who was living in the apartment with the painter, she's now having a full-blown sexual relationship, and they're having sex within full view of the village square, or not the village square, but the apartment square, I guess you could say. The cops try different tactics. They try climbing up. They try firing tear gas into the apartments. Nothing's working. They're just like treating it like confetti or something like that, the gas that's coming out of things. Then they end up tossing them back and forth between the different apartments and then back down into the street again. And eventually the cops just sort of give up. And at one point, the guy climbs down in the middle of the night and starts to run around looking, you know, trying to avoid cops who are all over the place. And he ends up finding a couple of police officers and taking them back to the apartment complex, knocking them unconscious and taking them back to the apartment complex. I'm like, what's the point of this scene? And then you see later on a giant slab of meat in each one of the apartments facing each other, roasting on a spit, and they're eating. And I'm thinking, oh, that's right, they were hungry. They grabbed a couple of cops to cook and eat. This movie is directed by a guy named Claude Faraldo. I've never heard of this movie before. I've never heard of the guy who made it. I don't really know anything. I didn't know anything about it. I just started watching it and was just constantly surprised at where it was going. After about 15 minutes, I realized there was really no talking at all. And I thought, wow, this is going to be a dialogue-free movie. And it wasn't quite dialogue-free, but still, it's all in a foreign language and it wasn't even subtitled. So I didn't know what the heck was going to happen. And so it was kind of an adventure watching it. I enjoyed it quite a bit. There were parts that I was a little iffy about, but then something would happen. I say, oh, I realize what's happening here. I understand what's going on. Whereas there are a lot of movies that are sort of obscure and bizarre like this that I don't really understand what's happening, what the motivation is. But the motivation is actually pretty clear in every scene. It's pretty clear in the end what everyone's doing and why, which is a good thing. So I like this movie quite a bit. So there's my review of Themroc, and I want to say thank you again for Matthew. He sent me The Devil and Miss Jones, which was a famous pornographic film from '73, The Last of Sheila, which was a film with James Coburn and a bunch of other stars, and The Tenderness of the Wolves, which was a German film, and Heavy Traffic, which was an animated film, partly animated, partly live action, from Ralph Bakshi, who did Fritz the Cat, and Cool World from 1992. Thank you again very Matthew for all those movies. I can't say that I love them all, but 3 of them I like quite a bit. And that would be Themroc, The Last of Sheila, and Heavy Traffic. All 3 of those I enjoyed very much. So thank you very much again for sending me those. And if any of you want to recommend a 1973 movie, I'm taking basically the whole year to watch 1973 movies because it was 4 years ago. Leave me a comment, check the playlist, see if I've done it already, but yeah, I'm open to suggestions because otherwise I'll have to start picking movies to watch myself, and I'm impaired. I can't do that. I need people to tell me which movies to watch yet. And I've got a bunch of suggestions yet to come. The next one is going to be the winner of Best Foreign Language Movie, which is called Day for Night. So thanks very much, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.